In this lesson, we are going to cover two constructions, and we are going to use a safety compass to help us construct our angles and our segments, really our rays that we're making in our lines. So this is a little bit different from a regular compass, but they're safe. You can't poke yourself with them. And we're still going through the same steps that you would go through with a regular compass. I have additional videos, review videos are posted in Schoology material, so you can also watch other videos that cover this if you want to watch additional videos. So the first construction is to construct an angle bisector. And so we should already be familiar with what it means to have an angle bisector, or what an angle bisector does to an angle. And we know that an angle bisector is going to cut the angle in half. So when we're all done, these two angles should be congruent. So we're going to try it on this first one, and then I'm going to let you try it on this second one and see how you did. And then I'll go through it. So what we want to do first is put the center of the swivelly white part on the vertex. And you're going to choose any hole. It doesn't matter. You just don't want it to be too small, and you don't want it to go off the angle. So I'm just going to take this one. I want to make an arc. So number one, you need to make an arc through the whole angle. Okay. Now the reason that we do that is because it gives us a point that is equidistant from the vertex on each side. So that means these two segments are going to be congruent because it's the same distance all the way around. Okay. Now from there, we are going to make arcs from each intersection point. So we make these two arcs. They have to be congruent, and we want to find where they intersect. So that means, and this is where it gets a little tricky, you have to choose the same hole for both arcs. So I will do, it's got to make sure that it reaches more than halfway across the angle. And so I'm going to choose this one right here. So what you do is you put the center of the compass on that intersection point, and you're going to make an arc somewhere in the middle of the angle. Now the best thing to do then is to just leave your pen in there, and we want to swivel this around. Now notice when I do that, these don't line up exactly, so pick it up slightly but still maintain the same hole that your pen is in. Okay, so now the center once again is on the other intersection point, and you're going to make an arc through there. Notice I didn't make a whopping huge arc, just enough that we can find where they intersect. And that is going to mark where we put the point to draw the ray. So here we want to connect the vertex through that intersection point, and that is going to be our angle bisector. So these two angles will now be congruent. Okay. If you want to give that a shot on your own, you can. So go ahead and pause it here. If you're still a bit confused, which is fine, we can do it again. So let's go ahead and look at this obtuse angle, see what happens here. So the first thing we do, again, is do the arc that goes all the way through. And this doesn't matter which hole you choose. You don't even have to remember which hole it was. Done. Okay? That marks these two intersection points. Now, again, we're going to make two arcs that are going to cross somewhere in the center of the angle here, that begin from each of these intersection points. So when you pick your hole that you want to use, you want to make sure it stretches past the vertex of the angle. So if you choose one really close, like this one, it's not going to work out for you. So I'm going to use this hole right here, do a little bit of arc, only enough to be in the center. Then just push your pen down and leave it there while you swivel this over. You can even pick it up a little bit. Just keep the pen in that hole so you don't forget which hole you used. And then do your second arc. So remember, the second time I put the center of it on the other intersection point. Okay, there we go. And the place where they intersect will be our ray. And that means these two angles will be congruent. So that's your angle bisector. Anytime you're given that ray AB bisects angle this XBY, then we know that these two angles will be congruent. And that is a major key in this unit that we're working on right now. So that's an angle bisector. And the second construction that we're going to work on is a segment bisector, and more specifically a perpendicular bisector. So if an angle bisector cuts an angle in half, then our segment bisector is going to cut our segment in half. So notice these are segments, they are not lines. So these are the endpoints of the segment. Okay, I really like this one for some reason. It seems like it has less steps, and I enjoy it. I actually enjoy both of them, but this one I like a little bit more. So we are going to put the center of the compass on one end. You need to pick a hole that stretches more than halfway across the segment. So I'm going to use this one right here. You're going to do an arc above and then kind of pick it up and do an arc below. Okay. Oops, I'm sorry. So I have an arc below down here. Okay. So I did an arc below here and one above here. Now once you finish that, we're going to do the same thing where you're going to leave your pen in that hole and you have to move the compass, keeping that hole, to the other side. So now the center of the compass is on the other end point. You're going to push down on the center of the compass and you're going to make another little arc in there, just enough to intersect the first arc. And then you need to pick it up and swivel it down underneath the line and do another one down here. So notice I didn't draw it all the way through here and all the way through here. That becomes a big mess and we can't actually see the segment bisector. So just enough above and below, so you have to pick it up slightly off the paper so it doesn't draw a full arc. So our first step would be arcs above and below, and they have to be congruent from each side. Okay, and we only have one more step, which is to connect those two together, and so you're going to draw your segment bisector. So you connect this point to this point here, and we can make that into a line. Now this does two different things. It is going to cut the segment in half because it's a segment bisector, so you need to mark those congruent. And it's also going to give us a perpendicular line. So to show that these two are actually perpendicular, you should mark the right angle. All right. Let's give this one more shot. Make sure that it makes sense to you. This time we're going to do the one over here. Okay. So the first thing, you put the center of the compass here. You want to pick a point that is more than halfway across. I'm going to use this one that has a big red dot next to it. More than halfway across. You don't want to go too big or you're going to go off the page down here. See, I would go way off the page. So if I stick with the red dot, I'm going to do the arc below, and then I'm going to pick it up slightly and do the arc above. Zoom out just a little and see if that helps. There we go. Okay. So arc above, arc below from this red dot. Now, I need to keep my pen in there, swivel this to the other side, and then I kind of have to pick it up slightly so that I can line up the center with the end point. And then we're going to do the same thing. Arc above. I got to switch hands. And arc below. Now, I did not make that first arc long enough, but luckily I can see right here where it would intersect. If that happens, though, you probably should go back and extend it even just a little bit further so they do, in fact, intersect. And then that will give us our perpendicular bisector. So when you read the word perpendicular bisector, perpendicular tells us that we're going to form a right angle, perpendicular, and the bisector tells us that it's going to cut the segment in half. Okay? Perpendicular bisector. So we've got to mark both of those pieces, one for each word, perpendicular bisector. Now again, if this is still confusing to you, you can rewind and watch this as many times as you need to, And also there are additional videos on Schoology of someone else doing it that you can watch as well. Good luck!